Job hunting stinks. I'm not gonna lie to you, I have never enjoyed the process. It can be long, it can be stressful, it can be incredibly frustrating, and it can be so easy to psych yourself out throughout the entire process whenever you think that one company is like finally gonna accept you and then you get that rejection email the next day. Or worse, they don't even reply to you at all. Yeah. I've been there on both of those. That said, it does not have to suck that much. And I can say that because I've used some of the tips that we're gonna talk about in this video in my job hunting process, and it has helped make things a lot less stressful and has allowed me to land some pretty fantastic jobs so far. So let's talk about the things that you can be doing in your job search starting today, right now, as soon as you're done with this video, to be able to make the job hunt a little bit easier, make it less stressful, and potentially give you a better chance of success with every single application. We're gonna talk about everything from burnout and job hunting fatigue to getting past that dreaded HR firewall, as well as networking and resumes. We're gonna also talk about hitting that like button because this video is helpful, enjoyable, you got something out of it, and you are just so curious to see what happens whenever you hit that like button. I also want to thank my friend Rahul for mentioning this video idea to me and allowing me to put this together. You can catch him as well as a bunch of awesome folks over at his Discord, Hackers Improve Here. There's a link to his Discord as well as Republic of Hackers. Both communities are solid if you are looking for a job. Both of those links are down in the description. I spoke with him recently about these tips and about the job hunting process, and he actually has been implementing these tips in his process, and that has allowed him to get interviews with a lot of the companies that he's applied to, and some of those are looking pretty promising. Now, of course, first, I want to give a word of caution. Do not ever lie in the process of looking for a job. Not on your resume, not in an interview, never. There are some folks out there that are offering services to either basically beef up your resume with all kinds of false certifications, as well as to even interview in a job hiring process on your behalf. Apart from this being highly unethical, it's totally going to set you up for failure long term, even in getting jobs later down the road and throughout the rest of your career. People talk, and that's the case with HR, that's the case with cybersecurity, and names tend to get sent around, especially whenever someone is proving themselves to be highly unethical and non-trustworthy. You do not want to be known as one of these people. And so if you're looking for a job, especially in cybersecurity, know that it is paramount to tell the truth, as trust is the backbone of everything that we do. Now let's talk about burnout. Burnout sucks, especially whenever you are in the middle of a job hunt. In fact, it can be even worse in this phase because if you're between jobs, then you're compounding on top of your burnout from work the stress of finances and making sure that all the bills are being paid, as well as the constant rejection that just naturally comes with the job hunting process. Nothing will negatively impact your search for a job as much as this, other than lying. This is definitely the next worst thing that can happen. If you're on the job hunt and you are currently employed, then I'd say you're probably in one of the better positions because you do have the finances for the most part squared away. You're able to pay the bills and you don't have that stress necessarily to contend with. That isn't to say that this is a fun or non-taxing process, because you're still dealing with like the rejection and the stress and making sure that the interviews are all good, but at least the finances are squared away. That said, if you are currently in the job hunting process and you do not currently have a full-time job, I would highly recommend doing something to be able to help pay the bills and just at least take that stress off of your shoulder. That way, you're minimizing the amount of stress that you're getting, and with the time that you're not working, you can pretty much spend the entire time applying for jobs. Also, be sure to remember that this process, just in general, takes a lot of time and it's not gonna happen overnight. There are a lot of steps in a company that take place between a stranger coming in contact with a company and then that person basically starting day one as an employee. And then you factor in the time that happened before that, where that stranger was interviewing at other companies, going through those processes, and everything else. I mean, it can easily be a months long process. It can be a very lonely process, and so it really helps to be able to rely on family, friends, or really just like the community around you to be able to ground yourself. And remember that this is a marathon, not a sprint. Again, this could be a months-long process. So finding those things, like the hobbies that you enjoy, definitely continue to take time out and enjoy those hobbies as much as you can to be able to ease the anxiety that you feel. What might also help you mentally and emotionally with this process is to know that your progress process is solid. A lot of people, whenever they're out hunting for jobs, they'll just submit the application and have zero follow-up. And then shockingly, in a couple of weeks or even days, they'll get that rejection email. That's because of the dreaded HR firewall. A lot of companies will automate this process where they will receive a lot of applications for different positions, and basically they will scan the resume for any kinds of keywords or phrases or anything that might be specific to the job role. And if a resume doesn't have all the matches that they're looking for, they'll throw the application out and it'll be an automatic rejection before any human beings actually take a look. Those can be anything from GPA to work experience to certifications. That said, it's even worse whenever you consider some of the job positions out there that have been posted that have absolutely ridiculous requirements for different jobs, like an entry-level cybersecurity job requiring a CISSP or an OSCP. Yeah, those exist. I'm sure you've seen those out there. Now that is its own can of worms to talk about in a later video, potentially. We've definitely talked about it a lot on the Cyber Monday show. But that said, don't let any of that dissuade you from applying anyway. Many folks recommend applying anyway, even if you only meet a few of those requirements. In fact, whenever I was talking to Raul earlier, he mentioned the 60% rule that he uses, where if he meets 60% of the requirements, he will apply anyway. Heck, those requirements that you meet might actually, if they are viewed by a person on the other side of the hiring process, it might just pique their interest enough that they will be willing to forward your application forward. So otherwise, how can we get past the HR firewall? We can't just add in a bunch of keywords or phrases that we know that they're looking for, because that would be less than honest. I've seen a lot of folks recommend adding aspiring to the certifications, basically to demonstrate that they're studying for the certification, and that also gets them past that keyword search filter. But I've also seen a lot of people say that that inherently means nothing because you don't currently possess the certification. So I'm gonna let you make your own decision on that one. But personally for me, and I know that Raul was talking about this earlier whenever we spoke as well, talking to individuals that work within the company can be a great way to circumvent the HR firewall. After all, anyone that knows about troubleshooting knows that speaking to humans is just generally better. So that takes us to networking, and let's talk about networking because it is much easier than you might think it is. If you have any kind of social media or a LinkedIn, or you create any kind of content, you are actually in a much better position than you think that you are right now. Whenever you apply to a role, or whenever you're considering applying to a role, try to find other individuals that work at the company that you're applying to. It can be very helpful to try to get in contact with them and then ask some questions about the company. And keep in mind that this can be for a couple of things. One, it helps you gain information about the company, and it helps them get information about you in case you sound interesting enough that they would be willing to sponsor your application in the company. I do want to note that this process goes two ways. Not only is the company interviewing you, you are interviewing the company. So definitely take time and ask whoever you're talking to about what the work culture is like and how things are going at the company and how employees are generally treated. This will give you a pretty good idea of what life will be like, because again, quality of life is extremely important. Cybersecurity is already pretty hard. You don't want to make it more difficult just by having a crappy work culture that you're in. And this can actually save you a lot of time, heartache, and stress, and eventually having to go back through this entire process all over again if the employee is willing to basically share that the work culture isn't so great. Maybe you should not apply at this time. Now, I mentioned creating content because that can actually be a great way to help you get a job in the future, because you're learning things. If you're constantly studying, if you maintain that student mindset, then you're going to do great in this industry. So continue to do that, but that can really help people a step or two behind you by creating content and helping them to learn along the way themselves. And that not only shows that you're willing to give back into the industry, but it also shows where you are in your cybersecurity journey. That way, whenever you're talking to these individuals, while you're basically doing some enumeration on the companies that you're applying to, they'll be able to see what you're doing and see the stuff that you're creating, the things that you're learning, and they will know that you're actually pretty legit. You're not just some, person off the street. You are actively trying to pick this stuff up and apply it. I highly recommend that you find people on LinkedIn or some other appropriate social media site to speak to. Sometimes the conversation goes pretty well, and then they'll be willing to forward your resume to a hiring manager within the company, and that'll basically be a nice inside hookup to get you a job. I do want to note in these conversations that nobody's entitled to anything, and they do not have to forward your application. Go into this again kind of ready to enumerate, and not necessarily with the mindset where you're going to brute force your way and get your resume forward, because ultimately that's only going to hamstring your attempt at getting a job here. Don't be upset if no progress is made in your application after a conversation. You can always circle back and talk to somebody else within the company, and maybe progress will be made there. But in either case, just continue to repeat the process and iterate through. And hey, if it doesn't work out, then it just doesn't work out. At least you will have learned more about the process. You have really just practiced the muscle of networking and reaching out to people, and you've learned more about the positions and kind of how that works out in the industry. So just try to iterate through the entire process. Try to stay positive as much as you can. Lean on your friends and family and the community around you, and of course take time out and just enjoy your hobbies to really try to blow off some steam, and don't let the pressure get too much onto you. Now let's talk about resumes, because those are a critical component to this entire process. We've actually talked all about resumes in this video, and you should absolutely check that out right now. Also, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more important information, because I am sharing more all the time. So with all that, I'll see you all next time. Bye.